All right, guys, I'm going to be sharing a screen with you. And today we are talking about men's mental health. We are talking about men's mental health because it is November, and November is, it marks men's mental health very specifically. It is a topic that is very important to me. It is a topic I feel I need to speak a lot about, and I will speak to anyone who will hear me. I feel myself to be really pulled to advocate for men's mental health. I know in more recent times, we have started to see more and more men start to speak up, especially men in positions and heads of state, etc., talking about mental health, which I am very happy to see. But I think there needs to be a lot more that needs to happen on this front. So let's begin with that. I just want to just let those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Dr. Saleh Afridi, because I'm still seeing people joining in. I am a managing director of the LightHouse Arabia, but I'm also a clinical psychologist. And I've been practicing for about a decade and a half now. And in the last 7 years, my work has been primarily with men. At the LightHouse Arabia, we see all ages and all, men and women and couples and families. We do psychiatry, psychology, and there's a lot of themes I pick up from there as well. But I will be bringing a lot of what I see in my work. The LightHouse Arabia has been around for a decade now in the UAE. We are the only mental health first aid certification provider, which is the International Mental Health First Aid. So if this is a thing that, I need to know how to have this conversation, because I will talk about this at the end, then I would really recommend every person to get mental health first aid certification. The reason why I say this up front is because maybe some people will drop off, but I think it is that critical that we think about mental health first aid and how do we respond, because oftentimes we do more damage than good when we say things that are unhelpful, which I will share at the end. So the talk is sort of divided into two sections. One really is about men's unique challenges, and then the second bit is about mental health overall. And if I were to tell you that 1 out of 4 people in your life will choke at some point and they will need you to do the Heimlich, or they will need CPR at some point, would you then say, oh my God, I have to actually get on with getting trained in being able to do physical first aid? You would. If I told you 1 out of 4 people for sure will have this happen to them, for sure we would all be lined up and getting first aid certification. Well, I'm telling you that 1 out of 4 people is struggling with a mental health disorder. They are struggling, and way more people are struggling with mental health difficulties. And I'll tell you the difference in all of these things. But if you knew that, then you would get certified. When it comes to your children, we have mental health first aid when adult to child, and then we also have teen to teen. So there's all types of things. I'm going to let you guys do that bit and find out more on our website. But we also have support groups. So a lot of times people will come to me and say, okay, well, mental health support is just way too expensive. Well, at the LightHouse, it is a mission. It is our commitment that we make mental health more accessible. So each and every clinician that works at the LightHouse is committed to this. And they do that by providing therapeutic spaces for people to come in and talk about the things they need to talk about. It is done in a group setting, obviously, because one-on-one, we would not be able to have that kind of impact. But it is done in small group settings where you are talking about specific issues. But we even have a general emotional health support group, which you can come in and talk about anything, but it's organized usually through single parents or divorce or racism. We have grief support. So it's divided, and we have 25 support groups that are led by licensed practitioners. So there's no reason why you can't dial in and just show up and talk about some of the things you need to talk about. Soon we will start having them again in person, but we will continue to do online support because we have people dialing in from all over. So I just want to mention this to you because I want to have that be a container as I give you lots of things that might, maybe make you a bit anxious or make you a bit concerned. So I wanted to mention that up front because usually I do this at the end, but I wanted to mention that up front. So let's talk a little bit about mental health difficulties. Okay, 1 in 4 people are struggling with a mental health disorder. Now, I'm not going to use the language of mental illness too much because mental illness makes it seem like it's someone who is very, very ill, and then that makes it seem like it's happening to someone else. But I will interchangeably use mental health disorder or mental illness here and there, but I personally don't like that language of mental illness because it just seems very pathologizing. But the disorder is that there is a disorder now, it is clinically significant, and we do need to address it. But mental health, regardless of whatever age or gender or IQ or race or religion, you could have disturbances in your mental health, okay? Every 40 seconds, someone is dying by suicide. And depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide, as we are today. Obviously, COVID and all of these other things that are happening around the world did not help with that. And obviously, the rise of technology and the rise of just being, behind our screens and being quite transactional in the way we go about things is not helping. But today we speak really about men's mental health, the prevalence of mental health issues in men, the unique challenges men face. What is mental health? What does it mean when there is a disorder such as depression or anxiety? How can you safeguard your mental health? And how can you support someone who is having difficulties? So let's just dive right in. Men's mental health, okay? Mental illnesses are underdiagnosed in men. So now I am talking about clinical issues that are in men that are presenting, but they are not being reported. So while we might say that depression and anxiety are more prevalent in women, we know for sure that men are struggling. They are suffering. And we know that by all of these other things that are showing up. We know that they die 8 years earlier than compared to women. We know they're more likely to use substances, 4 times more likely, 400% more likely to use substances. They're 4 times more likely to end their life by suicide. They're 11 times more likely to spend time in jail. They report lower life satisfaction. I think the number was 87%. 87% are more likely to be rough sleepers. And they have lower access to social support of friends and community. Men fail to recognize the different warning signs that show up because they are so disconnected to their bodies that they actually, whether it's physical health or mental health, don't go in as fast as women do. To report that they need support, to say that we need support is very hard for them to do. So whereas depression and anxiety will show up in women, antisocial behaviors or substance abuse or things like that will show up in men. And even if we look at younger, like girls and boys, adolescent girls and boys, girls will report more issues of depression, anxiety, eating disorders, but we will see boys showing symptoms of ADHD, antisocial, and committing suicide. So while girls will have suicidal ideation and suicide attempts, the completion is more likely to happen in young boys than it is in young girls. So you can see that there's a lot more aggression, and there's a lot more suppression and a lot more numbing that is happening in men and boys than it is in girls. And that's for many reasons that we will talk about now. Sorry, where's this? So the most important reason for that being that there is a cultural stigma surrounding mental health and that is one of the chief obstacles to people admitting that they are struggling and seeking help. This is across the board, every country, every culture, every race, every religion. Across the world, this is happening. There is a stigma where men are expected to be a certain way, to show up a certain way. They have this idea of masculinity. They have social roles that have been assigned to them that come with a certain level of expectations, that they must be strong and stoic, dominant, and always in control. But we know that men are suffering, but they are not going and reaching out for help. And because of that stigma, they're not getting the help they need. And that is why suicide is one of the leading causes of death for men globally. In the UK, it is the #1 cause of death for men that are between the ages of 35 and 45 to 59. It's the leading cause, okay? So this is a silent epidemic that is happening in men. But globally, we know that it's the 7th leading cause of death worldwide. Suicide is. This is someone who is really, really struggling, and they'd rather die than to admit that they are struggling. And why is that? This masculinity, what does that look like? When and this is stuff that I've heard in my sessions, but I've also known and read in books. This idea of masculinity: be a man, be strong, be tough, be stoic, man up. Aggressive behavior is accepted, but please do not cry, because that's for sissies. Vulnerability is seen as a weakness. To admit that I need support, to admit that I am hurting, to admit that I'm in pain is seen as a weakness. Asking for help is seen as a burden. And emotions are just for women. They're not the domain of men. And because of this kind of idea that they're just programmed in, and by the way, I'm a mother of 2 boys, and I have not raised them with such ideas. But they attended a workshop at the LightHouse when they were younger, maybe they were 9 and 10. And, the facilitator asked, do you think it's okay to cry? And they're like, yeah, it's okay to cry. But then they looked around and there were all these other boys in the room, and they're like, all these other boys were like, no, it's not okay to cry. So they put their hand down. And that was told to me by the facilitator, that this was something that they saw, that the struggle was real. So while I do teach, my voice says to my boys that it is okay to cry, and it is okay to talk about feelings, and I'm going to name the feelings inside of you, and you are going to go to therapy, and it's no big deal. The messages that they get from their schools, messages that they get from the playground, the messages that they might get from their coaches, or the messages that they get from the media is not the same message. It's still the old paradigm. It's still the old values of patriarchy. Okay. And so I have heard that, okay, I've learned to live with it, and I don't want to burden anyone. I'm just too embarrassed to talk about it. And there's too much of a stigma. I don't want to admit that I need support. I've also heard men that I have actually no one to talk to. When I go to my wife, this is something that I've heard multiple times. When I go to the women in my life, whether I go to my sister or whether I go to my wife, they get so rattled that then I have to take care of them. So I might as well just keep it to myself, because the woman in my life cannot contain the fact that I could have emotions, because maybe her father was not like that. Or maybe she needs me to be strong. Then I hear, oh, you just need a drink. Come on, let's go out. Let's just have a drink. Or you're too soft. or women need a tough guy. You need to be tough. And these are messages that I hear. And I've worked with hundreds of men at this point to know that this is across the board. If I go down the street to any man and say, does this sound familiar? They will say it sounds familiar. Maybe we can see a show of hands. Does this sound familiar to you guys? Yeah, it sounds really familiar. There's a lot of hands there. Yeah. And that's really sad. But why is that? Right? Why is that? Well, men have some very unique challenges. And this is coming from a woman who, who really fought for women's rights wherever she went, really spoke up for women's rights, really thought to exist in this space. And then as I got older and I started working with men, I saw, wait a minute, men are suffering just as much as we are. Men are suffering just as much as we are because they are bound by these restrictive roles just as much as we are. When it comes to patriarchy, this is not a man against woman world we live in. It is a man and women against a patriarchal system that we are living in. And patriarchy tells the man they must procreate, produce, protect, and be in power. So these restrictive roles that men are in is very much, they're bound by that. Ask a man if he has, can he just stay home and be with the kids? And what kind of looks is he going to get? Does he have to be the provider? Does he have to be the protector? Does he have to worry about the family and the education of the kids? And. That's a lot of pressure that they hold on to. And so productivity is a measure of their manhood. And they are really, where women have had their movements, men have not had movements. There's no man movement that is saying that we are not going to be bound by the same roles that we were. Women have had their movements. We don't want to be bound by the fact that we are going to go out into the workforce, or that we are not going to have children if we don't want, or we are not going to get married if we don't want. There's been movements for women, but there's been no movements for men. And so they're still judged by that old world paradigm and the old world patriarchal system. And if he decides to stay home and take care of the kids, he's considered lazy. He's considered, not man enough. What kind of man is that? Right? And there's no inner world that they're cultivating. They work. And then they get to 65 and then they're just supposed to retire honorably and then do what? Right? They have another 20 years where they actually there's no preparation, there's no relationships, there's no soul making that has happened throughout their lives because society does not make any space for them in that way. So, and they're not just silenced by culture, they're silenced by the women in their life, and they're silenced by the men in their life. And other men are perceived as the enemy. They're not perceived as brothers because competitiveness and power are the rule. So fear of not measuring up, I got to be the alpha, I got to be superior, I got to be competitive, I've got to show up, and there's a winner and a loser, and I ain't going to be the loser. This is the world that they're living in. And so men are more afraid of this, mental, by weakness or by illness, being incapacitated or feeling impotent. They'd rather die, suicide, than to admit that they need support. This is the silencing of men. Because power is such a central issue in the lives of men, that they'd rather die, and they'd rather drown in their sorrows. And there is so much shame. Oh my God, there is so much shame that they live with, that they actually can't do anything else with their pain because their shame is just this much. So their issues, their struggle cannot even be transformative. When I talk a lot, for those of you who know me, I talk a lot about making meaning. We've got to transform. We got to alchemize our pain. Men ain't having it. For me to get in there and to do that alchemy, that needs me to cut through decades of programming that it is weak to have emotions, decades and decades of programming on a cellular level. Okay. And so they are silenced, they're isolated, they're ashamed, and they have this male bravado. Underneath that is just a lot of pain. And I've worked with the most senior of men, and I've worked with the most junior of men, and I've worked with teenage boys, and I've worked with boys that are, 7, 9 years old. I've seen it across the board, guys. They all struggle with this, and they are alienated from themselves. And so they turn the rage onto themselves. And so they have these stress-related diseases. They have depression, which is anger turned inwards. They drink too much. They work too much. They want to reach a place where they feel no pain. So all of these numbing behaviors, including work, is a numbing behavior. Work is an addiction. Thinking that they need to just keep chasing the next thing, maybe because they're running away from what they might actually be experiencing, and going from one number in their bank account to the next number. That becomes their obsession because the inner world is so distant from them and they're so alienated from it. It's really lonely, guys. It's really lonely being a man. That I know. For men, it's really, really lonely because they don't get to go out as women do and sit with the people in their lives and be like, hey, man, I'm really, really struggling with this. They actually don't even know how to talk about it. In the last slide I showed you guys, where I talk about, I don't know how to talk about it. It's a language. If I ask a man, how do you feel? I feel bad. I feel stressed. I feel angry. I feel upset. This is the breadth of their emotional vocabulary. Where do you feel that? They don't know where they feel that. What do you mean? Where do I feel that? I feel it. I don't know where I feel it. They're disconnected. Ask me. Ask a woman, where do you feel it? She will point to, it's in her shoulder, it's in her other shoulder, it's in her neck, it's in her back. Men actually are very disconnected from that space. And that's why heart attacks and all these types of issues will show up. There's a lot of research being done on the role of emotional suppression in cancer. And some of this research was done with men and lung cancer. And they found that men who were emotionally restricted, right? When we talk about just not being able to talk about their emotions or just suppressing it and showing up as I don't have emotions and I am bionic, while many might say that smoking causes cancer, they found that actually scientifically that is not accurate. Men and women both smoke, but more men die of lung cancer than women. Why? Because studies have shown that lung cancer is 5 times higher in men who do not know how to express emotions effectively. 5 times higher in men who do not know how to express emotions. So there's a lot of people smoking, but there's a certain group of men that are dying of lung cancer more than other people that are smoking. And there was a link between emotional suppression and these people. And they found the same type of cases in like women and breast cancer and men and lung cancer. And if we go to the Chinese philosophies, it talks about lungs holding grief. Our lungs hold our grief. What are we grieving, men? Where is this grief? Where is this sorrow? Where is this shame that they don't have any space to express? They're grieving. They're grieving the loss of a childhood where they were not fully joyful or expressive. They're grieving a lot. Men are grieving a lot. And there's no space for them to talk about it. And so they procreate, they produce, they are in power, and they protect. They are the provider. And so there is pressure, and so there is pain. And this is the story of every man I know, every man, whether it's in my personal life, whether it's in my professional life. This is the story of every man. This is what they are up against. And there is a lot of pain there. And I just feel really sad about it. And so I hope, I pray for my sons, I pray for all the men, that there is an emotional movement that needs to happen, a releasing of the pain and the poison men have been holding in their collective stomachs and their lungs for centuries. It's not power-oriented, this movement. They don't want more power, but it is powerful in that it frees men and their spirits from the tyranny of the old paradigm of don't feel, die younger than women, don't talk, don't grieve, don't get angry, don't rock the boat, don't trust other men, don't put passion before bill paying, follow the crowd, not your bliss. This is what men have been dealing with for centuries upon centuries, where this patriarchal system has taken hold. So I want to honor all the men out there that I see you, I hear you, I know that you guys are struggling too. And that we need to do something about this collectively. Every woman has a part to play in this, and every man has a part to play in this. So now I want to just go into a little bit about what does it mean to have a mental health problem. Okay, so I want to just name that, and this goes for men and women. I'll keep bringing the men into this space again and again. So we think mental health illnesses or mental illnesses look like this, right? Mental health disorders, mental illnesses look like this. People just hunched over in this dark space and with a dark cloud over them. We think it looks like this, but it actually looks a lot like this. And we have people like Martin Luther King, we have The Rock, we have Phillips, we have Elon Musk, who all have talked about their struggles with mental health difficulties, with anxiety, with depression. And we show up to the world like this, but underneath there's a whole lot going on where you have to be the strong one. And this is what most of them have said, that how do I tell the world that I am struggling when I have this many gold medals and I am a man? How do I do that? And, how do I tell the world that I'm struggling with, the 2 suicide attempts? Martin Luther King, I have a dream. I have a movement. I'm going to change the face of, the civil rights movement. He had 2 suicide attempts, and he was struggling since a teenager with depression. How do you show up in the world when you have that kind of responsibility? And because my mental health is invisible, you can actually appear very confident and be anxious. You can be suicidal and show up to work just fine. You can have a panic attack and just perform minutes later. You could be throwing up in the bathroom and show up and perform minutes later. You could be battling with depression. And sometimes the most funniest people are the ones who are most depressed. If we take Robin Williams, for example, he was really suffering and he took his own life by suicide. He ended his own life by suicide. So some of these, happiest, sort of most joyful, engaged people are really, really suffering in silence. You can feel like an imposter. You can feel worthless. It's invisible. There's no like, oh, it hurts, I have depression. Although there could be physical symptoms of depression in men. So for the men out there, I would say physical symptoms show up. Anger, if you're very angry, that's going to show up. If your body is hurting, you need to check your mental health because your body will speak to you at some point. And so when I talk about mental health, I want you all to know that we all have it, and there is a spectrum. And we have good mental health on one end, and then we have poor mental health on the other end. The good mental health is there are days where we're feeling good. I slept fine, I'm working out, I'm feeling good, I landed some projects, I'm showing up to the world, and it's feeling good. Just like if we have good physical health, there are weeks where we are really feeling good because we really, tended to all the factors that play into our physical health. We're exercising, we're eating right, we're sleeping right, we're doing all the things that are good for our physical health. So we feel physically strong. Same thing goes for mental health. We can have weeks where we feel good mentally, and then it can move lower down the spectrum to where we start to hit poor mental health. This is where we start to get a bit disordered. Okay, when we get to the poor mental health, now there are days where we feel very stressed, and there are days where we feel sad, and there are weeks where we're feeling anxious, and then we're worried about something, and we're stressed about something. We feel too poor. If we stay in that poor mental health for too long, that's when it can start to become an illness. So mental health is not the same thing as mental illness. If that's the most important thing you will know today, is that you can feel disordered or diseased, and then eventually it will become a disease. Okay, so you want to catch it before it becomes too far out there. And most people are not tending to their mental health. Like if you don't tend to your dental health, if I don't brush my teeth and if I don't floss, I'm not going to get a cavity right away. Eventually, it will form a cavity, and eventually I might need to get a root canal. The same thing goes for mental health disorders, but there is mental illness. Mental illness is a real thing, and mental illnesses like mental health problems are major changes in your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors over a period of time, at least 2 weeks, for more time than not. And it impairs your functioning and it interrupts your life. This is more than just feeling sad for a week. I still show up to work, I'm still okay. It's more than that. It actually is, I'm not able to get out of bed. Or, you know what, I might be showing up to work, but I've withdrawn from every other part of my life. I've disconnected from every other part of my life, or I'm now drinking every time I go home. And that's all I'm doing. So it's actually impairing my functioning. Then it starts to become a disease. Okay, so this is a dis-ease. And so a mental health is where you're realizing your potential, you're coping with a normal day-to-day stress, you're working productively, you're making a contribution in your life. Yes, there are some good days, and yes, there are some bad days, but the good days are more than the bad days. And I'm still able to function. Okay, we're all going to struggle, guys. That doesn't mean that you have a mental health problem. We all are going to struggle. But the struggle, when it really starts to become more and more and more burdensome, you start to tip over into the poor mental health space. And then eventually that becomes a mental illness. You don't wake up one day and say, I'm depressed. Or you don't wake up one day and you have a panic disorder. There's a buildup. There's a buildup. There's a buildup. And if you don't take care of it in the interim, it then becomes screaming and loud into a full-blown disorder. And so mental health is something we all have. It's a very important part of your health. It's the mind, the thoughts, the feelings, and it's continuum. It's constantly changing. 1 week I'm here, 1 week I'm there. 1 week I'm feeling really strong in my mental health. The next me, I could be feeling not so good. And then there are weeks I might be actually in the poor state. And then I come back up and then I move. So it's a continuum. You constantly have to be checking in. It's not only something, mental health is not only for crazy people or people that are weak or anything like that. There is no such thing as crazy or weak. Okay, there's no such thing as crazy or weak. We just need to eliminate that. It's so dated, guys. And mental health is not the same thing as mental illness. So if I say I need to take care of my mental health, I'm not saying I have a disorder. I'm just saying I need to take care of it because I'm slipping onto the other side here. It's not about feeling good all the time. Please do not hear me say that you must feel happy all the time. Life is up and down, guys. We're going to have good days. We're going to have bad days. We're going to struggle. We're going to feel low. Something bad's going to happen. Sadness is a normal reaction. Our job is to name it, to talk about it, and to move on. Okay? When we don't, when we hold and hold and hold and hold and hold and we have nowhere to go with it, that's when it becomes an issue. And that's what men are struggling with, because they don't talk about it. And there's no space for them to talk about it. So let's talk a little bit about depression and anxiety. So is sadness the same thing as depression? No, sadness is a very common human emotion. I am sad a lot. There's a lot of things that make me sad. And then the next day I might be okay, or I might be sad for 3 days, and then I might be okay. It lasts a few days. There's some, I might have low energy. I don't want to work, and I just, don't want to hang out with anybody. Yeah. But something happy happens. I'm still engaged with it, and I'm not having any suicidal thoughts or anything. I'm just sad. Okay, 1 out of 10, I'm probably at a 5, but I'm still okay. I'm still working. I'm still there. I'm still able to take joy if my kid does something good, and these types of things. Depression is a serious clinical condition. Okay, so on that spectrum, good mental health, poor mental health, depression is outside of that space. This is now considered an illness. It lasts for at least 2 weeks, where you have feelings of where you no longer are enjoying the things you used to enjoy, and there's major changes in your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Low energy, low motivation, low engagement with things, low concentration, changes in your sleep, changes in your diet, meaning you eat too much, you eat too little, you sleep too much, you sleep too little. Any of these can happen. Changes in your appetite. A lot of shame and hopelessness and guilt. And then you might just be thinking things like, oh God, I just don't want to live like this anymore. I just don't want to live. I don't want to do this anymore. These types of thoughts start to show up. We call this ideation. This is not where you have a plan or, you're just saying, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to live. And so this is considered suicidal thoughts because it just feels too big and it feels too overwhelming. This needs addressing, guys, and there is treatment for it. This is not how you are supposed to be living. This is not life. This is not part of day-to-day sadness. This is serious. And if you feel like that more days than not, more for most days than not, more of the time than not, for 2 weeks, all day, most of the day, and it's impacting your way you are relating to your family, the way you relate to your work, the way you relate to your body, just disengage, the way you relate to your friends. If that's happening, please, you need to speak to somebody. But please don't wait till we get to that place. If you're feeling sad a lot and you're feeling heavy a lot, talk to someone so you don't end up in that place, because it does build up. It does build up, guys. And if it doesn't show up in an emotional depression, it will definitely show up in your physical body somehow. There's a book called When the Body Says No, and that will tell you about that. So what is clinical anxiety? So before I go into anxiety, I do want to say that anxiety, we all have it. Okay. Every single one of us can feel anxious. Anxiety is highly adaptive. It's it has helped us. It has helped us survive on this planet for as long as we have. It is good to have anxiety. We do not want to get rid of anxiety. We want to see anxiety on a spectrum. Okay. We want to see anxiety on a spectrum. Too little anxiety, and you're not going to be putting your seatbelt on, you're not going to be preparing for that presentation, you're not going to be looking both ways when you cross the street, you're going to be high-fiving people in the midst of COVID. That's going to be too little anxiety. We don't want that. Too much anxiety, and you are now paralyzed and you are now in a clinical space. We want healthy anxiety. It is adaptive. It is helpful. It's triggered by certain situations. We want to be on our toes. We want to be thinking through things. It's temporary. It comes on, it helps us, it leaves. They're just minor changes in our thoughts and our functioning where I'm feeling anxious before I have to present. So all this adrenaline is pumping through me. And so I show up in the best of way. I prepare in the best of way. I'm not having any suicidal thoughts or any types of situations. It's usually brought on by a situation, whether it's looking both ways before you cross the street, or whether it's traveling during times of COVID, or whether it's a presentation. It's usually something that we are responding to. That's normal. Clinical anxiety is not necessarily triggered. You're just feeling like that all the time. The cortisol, the adrenaline is just pumping through all the time. It's more long lasting. It is looking at these 2 to 3 weeks of this type of thing happening more often than not, most days than not. Okay, major changes in your behavior. You are starting to think, I don't want to live like this anymore. And there's a lot of shame and guilt that also shows up. So it's a serious condition. We don't want to get to that place, guys. Address the little anxiety so it doesn't become big anxiety. We want to keep anxiety. We do not want to get rid of anxiety. We do want to manage clinical anxiety. So change your relationship to anxiety. When that shows up, tend to it. But if your nervous system is so switched on, you can be sure that that clinical symptoms is going to start to happen more and more. If you are not self-soothing, you're not decompressing, you're overstressed all the time, you're overworked all the time, you're not taking care of your sleep, all of these things impact the way you have your anxiety. Just one night of not getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and you're more likely to be anxious the next day, 60% more likely to be reactive the next day. So sleep, eat, these are the ways the anxieties is going to show up. Physical symptoms, psychological symptoms, behavioral symptoms. If any of these are showing up in you, more often than not, you need to get support. You need to get support. Restlessness, muscle tension, sweating, dizziness, mind racing, indecisiveness. What do I do? What do I do? What coffee should I order? Even that can stress people out. Feeling on edge all the time. This is a big one for men. If you're angry and outbursts all the time, and then you feel so guilty because you keep taking it out on your family or your friends or your colleagues, this is a big, big red flag. If you're finding yourself agitated and restless and on edge and drinking more or smoking shisha more or smoking cigarettes more or doing some other things to numb your behaviors more, this is a red flag, guys. You want to tend to that. Safeguarding your mental health. This is what good mental health looks like. Connecting, there's meaning, physically well, performing, open-hearted. Coping is like, oh, okay, I'm starting to feel a little bit stuck, but I'm stressed, but my life is still going on. Most of us are probably in this range right now. And many of us are in struggling where we're reactive. A lot of men I know, and by the way, they're not men that I'm working with, just men out there are in this range. Because they actually don't have any coping skills because no one really taught them. You know, when they're little and they fall down, it's like, just be a big boy, don't cry. That's what they hear. So from a very early on, they just be a big boy. This is what it means to be a man. This is what it means to be a, come on, you got to man up, toughen up. This is what they're learning. And so they're not learning, oh, honey, you're hurt. There's that softness and that empathy is not there inside of them. So they're angry, they're anxious, they're chronically ill, they're numbing, they're struggling, and then many of them are unwell. Okay, this is where you might be in crisis. You're resorting to unhealthy coping mechanisms. Guys, please, please, please don't wait until you are at the end of this spectrum to get support. Get help in the yellow zone so you can just fluctuate between here and there. You've got to build up a toolbox. You've got to build up a language. Men, you have to build a feelings vocabulary. Bad is not a feeling. Hurt is a feeling. Betrayed is a feeling. Lonely is a feeling. Sad is a feeling. Bad is not a feeling. What do you mean by bad? Really, we've got to start developing a vocabulary, and emotional vocabulary is critical for you to develop more ability to first pick up on, oh, I'm feeling apprehensive, or I'm feeling agitated, or I'm feeling worried. That stuff, when it shows up, if you have the word for it, then you have the ability to pick it up. This is the science of emotional granularity, that if you have the language, you can pick up when it shows up in your body. But if you only have language for panic and depression, then you're only going to pick up panic and depression. Find the lower vibration, the lower frequency of emotions also. I feel worried rather than I feel anxious. I feel, I feel disappointed rather than waiting for it to just feel really, really, depressed. So pick up on the small words so they don't become, so you are able to pick up on it earlier. You will want to obviously have all of these things that you guys are doing. Support groups, skill building. You need to build a toolbox. Guys, we no longer live in the age of our mom and dad. We live in this age. And in this age, with the age of technology, we are inundated. We are inundated with work, with information. Our brains are stressed. Our nervous systems are stressed. We are more and more detached to nature. We're more and more sitting in our laptops. We're more and more detached to other people, especially after COVID. We don't have our strong support systems, especially here in the Middle East, where we're away from our families, away from familiarity. Exercise is a very, very good way to tend to your mental health. Exercise is more important for your mental health than it is for your physical health. John Ratey, Harvard psychiatrist who's done decades of research on the impact of physical exercise on your mental health, more important than it is for your physical health. The whole engine is one, guys. Psycho, neuro, endocrinology, immunology, right? I don't even know how to say it, but it's PNEI system, one system. My thoughts affect my heart rate, affect my other parts of my body, affect my sleep, affect the whole thing. And exercise is a great, great way for you to actually do the work of taking care of your mental health. Sleep, water, food. It's important, guys. We survived thousands of years on this planet, thousands of years on this planet without any of this stuff, without these books and these self-help. Why? Because we were sleeping when the sun went down, and we rose when the sun came up, and we got adequate sleep, and we drank enough water, and we had enough food, and we ate from the earth and not from like a plastic bag. Like, this is our engine. It relies on this. Our mental health depends on this. And if you need support, please seek help from a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Come to the support groups, and you don't have to talk in the support groups. You just can show up for the first many, many months and then start to talk if that's what you want. They're free of charge, guys. You have zero excuse except your own shame that you must tend to with self-compassion. But just say, I'm going to show up for myself, and you will be amongst those who will hold you and contain you, and you will do the same for them. I've already talked about all of this. So lastly, what do you say to people? And what should you not say to people? These are things you should not say to people. Be strong. Come on, man. It'll be okay. Oh, you shouldn't feel that way. Look at everything you've got. It could be worse. Stay positive. Be positive. Man, I'm really struggling. Well, don't give up. At least you have a job. If I hear that, what happens inside of me? I shut down. Actually, I'm just making a big deal about nothing. And that shuts down the man. It shuts down every human being, but it definitely shuts down the man. You have so much to be grateful for. And they're all ready. It took, a Herculean effort to come and even open up about some of this stuff. And this just shuts them down. This just says, I need to toughen up. I need to not give up. I don't know why I'm being so weak about this. When you don't make space, they shut down, and they shut down more. With every time they open up and they shut down, the walls come back, the wall thickens. And so I really, really want you guys to start to make space for the men in your life and to say things like, I'm sure it feels hard to be positive in a situation like this. When they say, I'm just trying to be positive now. Yeah, it feels hard to be positive. That's making space. I can't imagine what it's been like for you. I'm here to listen. This is really tough. I'm here with you. I'm just going to be with you. I have nothing to say. I don't know what to say. I don't know what I can say, but I'm here. I'd like to help you with groceries, with this project, with taking the kids out so you can get some sleep, whatever it is that they need help with. Asking them, what's this week been like for you? How are you doing? How are you feeling? But don't ask if you're not going to stand there and listen. So make some time. Hey, do you want to go out on Thursday? We can go out together and maybe we can talk. And, that's it. And then check in and hold space. Don't say things like, oh, I've been through that too. They don't need to hear that at that time. Just hold the space and let them talk and ask more questions as if you were a reporter that needed to write a story about their experience. The who, the what, the why, the when, the how. And then you can share advice or whatever. Ask them, do you want me to share any of my thoughts with you? Or do you just need me to hear? Because sometimes they just need you to hear them out. They know the answer. They just need a space to sort of digest this. Guys, through expression, our voice, when we get hit by something, we say, oh God, that hurt. And it soothes the pain centers in our body. When we are able to breathe it out, we are releasing certain chemicals in our body that's soothing our body. So we need that. We need to talk. When I'm talking to you and we are sitting together, oxytocin is being released in my system. I'm being regulated by you, by your system. So people are like, well, what can I do? I can just talk to them. I don't know what to do. Don't do anything. Just be with them and hold the space and listen. Ground yourself before you go into such conversations. If you are going to go hold the space, don't go in when you're feeling all frantic. Holding the space is a sacred thing, and it's you have to honor it with your whole being. So ground yourself, anchor yourself, and then go in and say, tell me how you are. And then you might share your own experience and say, yeah, I remember I went through that, but only after you've heard them all out. Okay. If you don't know what I'm talking about, on my Instagram account, I talk about how to listen, and listening does not mean you share your own experience. Listening just means listen. And then you share your own experience. That's relating, and you can do that at another time or a later time in that conversation. I'll end with ex-President Obama. When something inside of you feels like it's wounded, it's just like a physical injury. You've got to go get help. There is nothing weak about it. My head hurts. I go, maybe I go get a scan done, or my leg hurts. I go to a doctor. My foot hurts. I go to a doctor. If my heart hurts, if my mind hurts, I go to a doctor. I go talk about it. That's it. We need to take the drama out of it. We need to depathologize it. We need to normalize it. We need to talk about it. And men, please do this with other men. You don't know the power you have when you do that. And women, please don't shut them down when they start opening up and start feeling all frazzled. Make space, guys. we together can change the narrative. We together can bring down this paradigm. We together can bring down patriarchy that has all in these restrictive, binding roles and expectations. All of us are suffering because of this. Women in their own way, men in their own way. These are two of the handles that I contribute to. For parents, we recommend these two. For youth, teenagers, young adults, we recommend this one, Lighthouse Insight. If you are the parent of someone who is a young person, a teenager or a young adult, I would also recommend following this one because we really give very sound information. There's so much out there from all sorts of people, but this is from clinical psychologists and counseling psychologists, content that we have created. For parents, if you have young children, young boys, girls and boys, but especially boys, I would really recommend getting the Smart Heart board game. It is a co-created project by Christine and myself at the Lighthouse. It's a board game. It talks about feelings in a way that is good for boys and girls. But for young kids, and it's a board game, and you talk about different scenarios. You learn the inner world of your child. You teach them an emotional vocabulary. So if you want to know more about that, go follow that account and you can learn more about emotional vocabulary. It also has, different kinds of feeling words. One thing I will say is that my kids never threw a tantrum. I have 4 kids. None of them threw a tantrum. And it's not because I'm like one of them cried a lot. She was colicky, but she was an infant at that time. But after they hit 2, 3, there was never any tantrums because there was always emotional coaching that was going on. If I saw them sort of derailing, I knew what to do. So in that game, it basically is, I did my dissertation in parenting. So everything we know about emotional intelligence has been put there. And I really do think we need to start early. The messages that boys get are toxic. And so we really need to put all of our efforts on that front to make sure that there is the divine masculine that shows up and not this toxic masculine with this false bravado and this inflated self. And, it's not real. It's not real. Inside, it really is quite different of a picture. So those are the Instagram accounts. If I don't get to your question, I'm going to take questions now. You can message me on my Instagram account and I'd be happy to answer it there. Okay, so I am now, so group therapy. So can you tell us more about where you can find these groups? Guys, go on our website and you can register for free register for free on our website. Under the events section. I'm going to post about this. I'll make a video about this on my stories and I'll put a link to it. But if you go on www.lighthousearabia.com under the events section, all of our support groups are there. If you go at LightHouse Arabia on the Instagram, you will find all of our events listed there. So that's what I would say about that. We don't have a branch in Saudi just yet, inshallah. But the support groups are online, so I really would become. I would really join in on that if I were you. Somebody said that. I'm worried about my son. He was just doing really well. He was behaving, he studied well, and all of a sudden he is diagnosed with ADHD. ADHD doesn't get diagnosed like that, guys. If he has symptoms of ADHD, doesn't mean he has ADHD. ADHD is a neurodevelopment disorder. It should be present prior to the age of 7. All of us are ADHD right now. We all have attention deficit. We all have hyperactivity. We all can't sit still. We all feel like we're jumping from thought to thought. That doesn't mean you have ADHD. Please, please, please get proper assessments done. For you to get a proper assessment of ADHD, you need to go through hours of psychological assessments in which we look at all sorts of issues, including how you were prior to the age of 7 or 8. Okay. There is a criteria you must meet. It cannot just be, oh, I can't sit still. My mind is racing. My thoughts are happening. Okay. Doesn't that sound like all of us? Yeah, it does. So it's way more than that. So I really encourage you guys to get a proper assessment done. Please do not self-diagnose. Please do not go on a website. Please do not just go off of a rating form. The rating form only looks at behaviors and then it medicates behaviors. You've got to do the full assessment. And I have children, I would never ever medicate them off of a rating form. The full assessment is necessary. Yeah, Robin Williams, that's right. What is a rough sleeper? Anyone who has poor sleep. So they're not sleeping properly. They are not breathing properly when they sleep. Sleep apnea is very much present. Yes, there will be a recording later. We will be sending it to you and you guys can share it with those who are who are not here. You can share it with whoever you want. Let's see, other questions. How long does it take for a feeling of a disease to become like an illness if we don't tackle it? It depends on everyone. Guys, I could be going about my life and then let's just say, you know, I'm not taking care of my mental health. And by taking care of your mental health, what do I mean? Sleep, eat, right? Our gut and our brain are connected to each other. 90% of our serotonin is produced in our gut. If you are eating junk, guess what else is junk? If you are not sleeping properly, you will be more reactive the next day. You will cause more stressors to show up in your life. Your brain changes, your aperture narrows. You start to see threat when there is no threat. Where there is no threat, someone looks at you a little bit like, and you say, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. That's how our programming was. Our fight or flight system is there to detect threat. It is not there to, you know, look at the flowers. It's there to say, look for any sign of threat in the environment and then prepare. That's how we survived for thousands of years. So when you are not sleeping properly, you are going to detect threat where there is no threat. A bush moving is a tiger. Someone's bad look is you being fired. And then it's a reality inside of you. And then there's anxiety, then there's this. So if you don't have a way of coping with that, if you don't know, oh no, come on, man, I'm just making that up. Like if you don't have thought stopping and you don't have self-soothing and you don't have the ability to look at your cognitive distortions, these are all skills. No one teaches us this. If you don't have a way to name that feeling, name it to tame it. If you don't know how to express that to another person, that's another toolbox thing. I'm just going to go talk about it. I'm going to go run it off. All sorts of endorphins get released in your body. It's called a runner's high for a reason. You're high after you run. And that is a good mood elevator. Even once a week, if you are doing that, you are changing your chemistry. This is how you take care of your mental health. You don't have to sit in therapy for taking care of your mental health. You do need to come into therapy to learn some of this stuff, to talk about some of this stuff, but that's not how you take care of your mental health. Mental health is everything you do. It's how you cope with the stressors. Do you know how to draw boundaries? Do you know how to say no? Do you know how to deal with conflict? Do you know how to have a difficult conversation with your sibling or your husband or your wife and say, I need this. I'm not feeling well. Do you know how to have that conversation? That's how you take care of your mental health. So it's actually not rocket science to, you know, like it's not rocket science at all. Guys, if you're not sleeping well, really address this. Sleep is the single most important thing you can do for your mind and body, and your whole system will come tumbling down if you are not sleeping well. mental health first aid, you can get more information on our website. We have a public course that we run once a month. We also have mental health first aid for the parent to the teen. So how do you detect mental health difficulties in your child? And then how do you talk about them? And then we have a teen to teen mental health first aid. So at LightHouse Arabia on Instagram has all of this information, and our website has all of this information. You're most welcome, guys. So lots of comments about thanks. Men, I see you. I really see you. And I applaud you for all that you do. And I thank you for all that you do and all that you cope with. And I see how lonely it can be. Let's see. Let's see. Yep, I'm still, yes, bad marriage, bad relationships, any relationship that might be unhealthy can impact your mental health. So it changes your chemistry. Anytime there's a change in your internal chemistry, it's going to travel up to your brain. Okay, so dehydration can impact your mental health. Eating bad food can impact your mental health. Not moving can impact your mental health. Difficult relationships where you're constantly feeling stressed and tense and you're fighting and it's abusive, and all of that can impact your mental health. Everything is one, guys. My psychology, my neurology, my endocrinology, my immunology can impact. All of it is one system. My fascia, the issues are in the tissues, they say, right? Our fascia, when we have tension, right? We all have tension. If you just touch your shoulders and you touch your back like that, you have tension in your body. And that tension will build up, and then that tissue starts to harden. When it becomes hard, that's where cancers can form. When our heart aches, why is there breast cancer in women that hold their anger? That's a fact. Women who are emotionally repressive develop breast cancer. Men who are emotionally restrictive develop lung cancer. Why is that? Because there is a lot of tension in this part of our body. And when that tissue hardens, the cancer needs to be able to grow on something, and it grows on hardened tissue. So we need to do all of these like physical movement, yoga stretches, long stretches, chest openers, hip openers, horse riding, cryo chambers, everything to have a healthy body and mind. Okay. Yes, we do hope to have a men's support group. And guys, so somebody asked, how do I just start to be more open with men, with other people? I would say, tell them you're trying something new. Start off with that, because they'll be like, what is going on with you, right? I would say, listen, you know, I'm gonna try something different. I'm tired of holding my feelings in. I don't want to hold them in anymore. I want to share what's going on inside of me. It's going to come out completely wobbly like Bambi on ice, but I'm going to take a chance. So bear with me as I do this. Okay. And bear with me as I stumble about my emotions. It might come out the wrong emotion. Please give me suggestions on what the right emotion might be. Because sometimes I have to say that to my husband. Like, he'll be like, I feel really hurt by this. And I said, you feel really betrayed. And he's like, that's it. He calls me like an emotional Jedi when it comes to the language. And so sometimes people are like, do you feel guilty? I'm like, I don't feel guilty. No, I feel anxious or I feel disappointed, but I don't feel guilty. Getting really, really nuanced in the way you feel things. It's going to take time. Just like you're not going to go on Formula One race car driving. You first have to get your driver's license, right? It's slowly building up to that. So it's going to be an emotional journey that you're about to go on, but it's important to share that with the people in your life that I'm going I'm going to tell you. And these are things I don't want you to say. These are things I want you to say. And then if the person is like, oh, it's going to be okay, then give them feedback. That's not helpful. When you tell me that, it's not helpful. I just want you to listen to me. So this is how you start to open up. Be super transparent about the process and teach each other. Teach your partner how to be there for you. Teach them what you need and how they can give it to you. I don't need you to give me advice. I just need you to listen. Hold the space. Don't tell me how you had the same experience. I don't want to know. I just want to talk. That's it. So giving them that kind of feedback is going to be very, very important. All right. I think that's it. There's a lot of other questions, but I think I have another talk I have to go to. I'm going to just check. Yeah, no, not yet. I can maybe take a couple more questions. Let's see. Yes, there is a criteria that you need to meet in order to have depression. So we're not just saying this person kind of looks depressed. There's a checklist. And if you meet 5 out of those, then you will be diagnosed with depression, but you need to meet that criteria. So it's called the diagnostic criteria, and anxiety has its own criteria, and dementia has its own criteria, and depression has its own criteria, and substance abuse versus substance dependence has its own criteria. ADHD has its own criteria. So there is a list. It's not like, oh, I feel sad, I'm depressed, or I'm going to wing it. I'm going to give you that diagnosis. No. And sometimes people don't meet the criteria. So we give them maybe a not otherwise specified, meaning that they have some of the criteria. It's really impacting their life, but they don't meet the full criteria. So there is even a kind of a criteria, like a half criteria, but it's impacting their life. Panic disorder, phobias, all of these have their own criteria. So if you are concerned about your mental health, I would say book an emotional well-being check at the Lighthouse. These are done by clinicians. And what you do is you go in for a 30-minute appointment. It's a low-cost commitment. You're not trying to go and start therapy right now and just say, I just want to know how I'm doing. And these are some of the things I'm going through. Do I need therapy? Or can you give me some resources? Can I read a book? Can I take a course? What can I do? So it's a 30-minute appointment, and just go ahead and do it. Okay. And then check in with yourself. Just like you go for a dental checkup every 6 months, I would say this is what you need to do for yourself. Just go in every 6 months. Hey, how am I doing? Just here to check in on myself. We need to make it a little bit more normalized. Just like we go for every other checkup, we need to start going for every other checkup. And the times where life is very stressful, you're going to want to be checking in on yourself a lot. And for me, I spend a lot of hours a week on my mental health, whether it's horse riding, whether I go to the cryo chamber, whether I do LED bed, whether I do assisted stretching, whether I do walking every day, what I eat. And then I have therapy 2 hours a week, sometimes 3.5 hours a week. This is all every single week. I show up for my therapy every Monday and every Wednesday. This is what I do for my own mental hygiene. It's hygiene, guys. It's not mental health. Just throw out mental health and consider mental hygiene. What am I doing for my mental hygiene today? Everything I do, every move I make is going to be for my mental hygiene, because it's so delicate and there are too many people relying on me. There are too many people relying on me. So the more people that are relying on you, the more you want to be able to make sure that you're tending to your health. And then when the crisis comes, because it always does, then you're not like running on empty. So when someone asked me that question, I don't even know if I answered it, but someone asked me that question, like, how do you know? Like, is it always like that? Well, for example, I could be seriously resourced, right? I'm a clinical psychologist. I do my therapy and I do all of this. All of this is going on. But then a big crisis comes. I might be able to handle it because my resources are there, but it's still going to throw me off. I might not go into the full-blown disorder, but I'm going to be really compromised. But that's because I had good, strong muscle inside of me, good mental health already. But if I'm running on empty and I'm not taking care of myself and I'm just giving, and I'm just tending, and then the crisis hits, there's no resiliency there. I'm wiped out. I've been there, done that. Men who are burnt out, women who are burnt out, men and women who are spent, you're headed in that direction and you're not ready if a crisis hits. I'm always ready for the crisis to hit. Like, I need to have enough muscle in order to hold that, because I'm a mother of 4 children. I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister. Like, I can't be compromised. So that's going to be very, very important. You've got to build that resiliency. You've got to build that resiliency. It doesn't just happen. I do not offer therapy myself. What I will be doing with my colleague JV is I will be doing therapeutic journeys with people. They will be within a group setting. We will go on an inner journey where we will be tending to lots of different parts of ourselves. So that is something that we are looking to launch very soon. So if you're interested, make sure you direct message me on my Instagram, because it is going to be a closed group and it is going to be limited people. So we can't have more than 10 people per group, and we might only do 3 groups. So if you are interested in going on a therapeutic journey where we will be spending, maybe 4 hours, 5 hours every 3 months with 90 minutes in between. So every 3 months we spend 4-5 hours, we do some deep work, and then we meet for 90 minutes to talk about some of the things that are coming up for us. That's going to be something that we will be launching, but direct message me if you want to be sort of involved in that, because it will probably get filled up. But I always like to give people an option who are sort of already part of my community before I give it to someone else. So direct message me on my Instagram account if you are interested in that journey. We do require you to have a commitment that you make. This is a commitment that you need to make to being on a 1-year journey. And for those who are asking, this is my Instagram account. All right, guys. I hope this was helpful. Yeah, if you have any questions or thoughts or other stuff that comes up, please feel free to message me. And yeah, and that's not my, actually, that's wrong. That is not my account. That is my account. All right, bye guys. You guys will get the link to this. Take care of yourselves. Bye.